Yo, what's up? We're back. Okay, so this week the pre-patch launched. Everything you need to know for patch 11.0 article dropped on Wowhead, and it's very informative as to what's going to be happening with the pre-patch itself. First and foremost, I've seen a lot of people ask this question: when is the pre-patch event start? The pre-patch event starts on July 30th. So the week after the pre-patch or pre-expansion event has launched, the pre-expansion, basically the event starts. And what this event starts is like memories of the past, and basically you go through and it kind of looks like this actually, in the preview, where you'll go in and complete tasks with mobs that have this weird blue hue to them, supposed to be memories of the past. And these are in classic level zones. Like this is like outside of Stormwind and the Blasted Lands and stuff like that, where you'll be like fighting these mobs. Additionally, it's a very great way to get gear. If that's something that you're actually looking for, if you're looking to gear up some alts right before you're looking to level, you get like 480 item level gear from the pre-expansion event. And so it's a really good opportunity to be able to gear up some characters. The other things, I've seen this question a lot as well. For the other pre-expansion event stuff, there's no hero talents available, and you can't, go into the new zones. There's no new delves yet, but those things are going to be coming in the future. What is already released is obviously you have some class and talent tree updates. The warband system is in. Skywriting is available for most mounts, and then obviously the pre-patch event is next week. And additionally, Blizzard had a little bit of a tough time of getting the servers online on Tuesday, but they are compensating players by giving them a day's worth of game time, which I actually think is unprecedented. Basically, since I've played the game, I started in the middle of WoD. I've actually never seen them give compensation game time, so it's a new one for me. But warbands are out. You're able to customize your warband, and you can customize and put the top 4 characters that you want into your warband at the top as well to show them off on your login screen. It's actually kind of cool. Yeah. So with that as well, we had a post on, it was 4 days ago. We had a post talking about what the raid schedule and the M Plus schedule are going to be looking like, with Mythic Plus not being open during Heroic Week also being part of the title. So let's kind of just look at what's going on. So the pre-expansion event goes live in a few days. Then the expansion is going to launch, right? With early access getting the availability to play on the 22nd. Then non-early access people will be able to get the game on the 26th. I think personally, I don't really talk about this with a bunch of narrative voice, but anecdotally, I don't think this feels very icky. Personally, I think that I'm not in love with this, but it is what it is. Then on the 10th, so two weeks into the expansion, War Within Season 1 begins, and that will allow things like Heroic Raids, Raid Finder, Wing 1, M0 dungeons, Heroic dungeons, a new world boss, and PvP Season 1. Yeah, so basically, there's not a ton here. You're going to be able to get gear from delves, but on top of that as well, Heroic Raids, normal raids are open. Whenever the expansion goes live, the only thing that's going to be available during the pre-release is normal dungeons are open, but then once and then eventually Heroic dungeons and M0s and stuff like that are going to be open. But what this kind of means, and I'm going to talk about this in a little bit, is that the M0 gear is actually going to be on a completely different track. It's going to be on like one gear track level lower, to where the M0 gear is not actually worth doing. If you're looking to optimize your gear during week 1, the best thing you can do is do normal and heroic raids, and then you can go do delves for gear, which obviously is not some players' cup of tea. But M0 gear just not as valuable as has been in the past, and especially with heroic raids and heroic week like this, the M0 gear is not going to be like super valuable. Then the week after that, Mythic raids unlock, M Plus dungeons open up, Raid Finder Wing 2 opens, and the story difficulty opens, and then eventually Raid Finder Wing 3 opens. The only other massive piece of information that came out of this blue post obviously was talking about just the difficulty item rewards track, where M0 gives you veteran 593 gear, where in the past it would give you champion gear. So it's one track of gear lower. It's instead of being on that normal raid gear track, it's now on that LFR gear track, meaning that gear is I don't want to say completely useless, but it's a lot less valuable than it has been in the past. And then the other big thing, in my opinion, is that the only way to get myth track gear in the past would be you're able to do eights, I think was the first track of myth. Eights would give you myth 1, and then 10s would give you myth 2. Now only 10s give you myth track gear. 10s are actually very difficult whenever you're in like heroic raid gear on the beta right now. And so 10s are not going to be something that just people are going to be able to walk into on week 1. They're going to be something that takes a little bit of time before you're able to even be able to do that. All right, so Myth Track. Myth Track upgrade has been extended from 4 to 6 levels in the War Within beta. Basically, it was only 4 levels for all of Dragonflight, but it actually got changed to be 4 of 6 on the latest build of the beta, where if you go and look at the Dungeon Journal right now, as you see on screen here, it'll actually say Myth Track 6 of 6. And what this does is there's a couple of things that actually end up, a couple of implications that change here. First and foremost, like I was saying earlier, they have the myth track starting at plus 10, so it's going to be a little bit harder to get myth gear if you're just like an M plus only player anyways. But on top of that as well, basically all of the raid gear goes to what is previously the very rare equivalent, and so it's no longer there is no longer this very rare moniker. Instead, it's just gear that starts at the 639 item level. But heroic gear is now going to be 13 item levels below max level of myth gear. Most of the tracks are actually 13 item levels between them. And so now they've just normalized it to where the myth track is 13 item levels between it as well. But this has a couple of implications. First off, if you're max heroic gear, in the past you would only be 6 item levels behind, and now you're 13, meaning that there's going to be a more stark difference between those who are max geared and those who are not. On top of that as well, crafted gear in the past was only 3 item levels worse than mythic level gear or max mythic level gear. Now it's going to be about 10 item levels worse. So meaning embellishments and just crafted items in general, you're less incentivized to be wearing those. This means that players who raid Mythic are going to have a lot more opportunities of getting myth track gear on a per week basis, particularly those who are like, cutting edge level players. Whereas M plus players are very beholden to the vault to be able to obtain the myth track level gear. This is going to mean that M plus only players are going to have a pretty significant power decrease relative to what they had during Dragonflight. Not allowing them to necessarily be max geared. And, there's going to be a situation where in Amir Drasil, you could, within reason, if you're not rating, be about 1 item level behind those players who are doing like all the content rating and M plus and stuff like that. But now you're going to be somewhere in the order of 2 to probably 2.5, if I had to guess, just because you are basically praying, like if you're not rating, you're basically praying that the vault is going to be able to grant you just some myth track gear that you can wear. Not only that as well, but a lot of times too, you'd actually be wearing the lower item level trinket equivalent, so like the 522 equivalent. And so you'd actually be like wearing these hero track gear because those were your best trinkets from M+. But now with them being down 13 item levels, it's hard to justify wearing some trinkets that are down 13 item levels whenever there are potentially better options, meaning that some players, if you're looking to be optimal in M+, the best way you're going to have to do that now is to raid. There was also this tweet by Now, and I actually think that it shows off like some of the other repercussions pretty well, where so whenever the track goes up from 4 of 4 to 6 of 6, the aspect crests that are needed to be able to upgrade your gear all the way to full is also going to go up a significant amount, where now is calculated to be from 45 runs to 98 runs to be able to upgrade all of your gear from the 623 to 639. Now, obviously, if you're rating Mythic, you're not going to be upgrading all of your gear from Myth Track 1, but if you're only doing M+, you actually are going to be upgrading all of your gear from Myth Track 1, whereas like Raiders, some of the gear starts at Myth Track 1, but some of the gear starts at Myth Track 4, and so you're able to get some cost reduction on your crests that way. And so effectively, if you're looking to gear a character at the end of the season and you have all this Myth Track gear, it's going to take you about 98 runs of M+, whereas it would take you 45 in the past. And that's been met with a lot of animosity. People were not super happy about that, knowing that if they wanted to start up an alt, it was going to take them a lot of runs to be able to even get all of the gear maxed out. All right, last thing to discuss this week. We have more Mythic Plus affix updates. So Oblivion has been added. Voidbound is an affix that is been changed as well. And so For those who don't know, let's actually just talk about Voidbound first. Voidbound is the emissary that would spawn the Void Emissary, and the Void Emissaries would actually, in the past, get stuck in place. They had a lot of HP that you had to chew through. The buff wasn't as satisfying as possible, and Blizzard has done some things to be able to address that, where the Voidbound Emissary will now follow the tank after being summoned. It doesn't necessarily follow the tank, but it follows the player that has a generated threat on the Voidbound Emissary, which is fine. In addition to that, the Voidbound, these mobs don't melee, so it's not a big deal. The Voidbound Emissary's health has been adjusted, and its health no longer scales with Fortified. On top of that, the shield is a lot smaller if you actually play that. The mob also starts with 0% HP, and it's just an overshield, and so things like Execute and Touch of Death can actually be deployed on the mob immediately. Additionally, Dark Prayer now grants 5% damage to all enemies in combat every 2 seconds, adjusted from 10% damage to all enemies in combat every 3 seconds. People, I think that this has been the most critical part of the affix, is that it can just spawn at weird times and then make the mobs do more damage to you immediately, causing you to die or wipe in some instances, because like if you get really bad timing, it can just kill you off. Also, Blessing of Beyond now grants 20% cooldown reduction in addition to 20% critical strike. And this buff is actually very powerful. CDR is one of the coolest stats that Blizzard can actually grant to players. And I think that granting 20% CDR in addition to 20% critical strike is sick. On top of that, we have another affix called Zaltath's Bargain Oblivion. I'm kind of interested in seeing how many affixes we have. I wonder if we're going to have 3 or if we're going to have 4, maybe even potentially more. This is going to be the third affix. So you have the orbs that you would see similar to the Razageth orbs. Now you have Voidbound, and now you have Oblivion. And what Oblivion is it while in combat, Zalatath manifests crystals from the void that can be absorbed by enemies or players. These crystals will spawn near enemies and move towards them until they are absorbed by players or collide with the targeted enemy. Players that absorb these crystals gain increased mastery and leech. This increased mastery and leech is party-wide. Basically, it stacks all the way up to 10, and whenever the crystals collide with targets, then those mobs take reduced damage per crystal that they've absorbed. Now, the crystals I would say, are kind of buggy, but I suspect that this is going to get fixed. Sometimes whenever they spawn on uneven terrain, they can get lodged into walls, they can get like stuck in the air as they fly towards the mobs, and that's basically due to Z-axis and spawning on uneven terrain. In general, I think the affix is like kind of decent. I think it's nice that it's like a party-wide change and a party-wide buff, and so I think that that's something that's really cool. It kind of benefits everybody kind of participating in these and playing keep away against the mobs that are you're fighting against. There is some weird spots where if the mobs are like in combat but not necessarily in combat with you, the crystals can go towards them and then buff the mobs that you're in combat with. I think of like the Dawnbreaker, whenever the mobs are like fighting NPCs, the crystals can, if those mobs are the closest to the crystal spawn, the crystals can just like beeline towards those mobs. And that's maybe a little bit weird, but I suspect, this is just like first week woes with Zaltath's Bargain Oblivion. All in all, though, it's been a very big week for the news. A lot of changes that we're actually seeing happening inside of dungeons, inside of the raid, really gearing up and ramping up for the War Within as the pre-patch event starts. If you're looking to gear some characters and get ready for launch, get ready for leveling, I would recommend going and trying to do as much content as you can during the pre-patch event, the Radiant Echoes pre-patch event, because again, the gearing from that is phenomenal. Anyways, that's gonna be it for me today. I hope to see you guys in next week's video. I'll see you guys later. Goodbye.